and thank you for joining us for PrintPulse Live this month. Beyond the Prompt, Agentic AI for Print Professionals. I'm your PrintPulse host, Lee Eldridge. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, I'm a researcher and educator at Toronto Metropolitan University. I'm a member of the board of directors with the OPIA, and I work in graphic communications and digital design with a focus on AI in creative and print environments. Today, we're going to be continuing on from our last session last month about Agentic AI for print professionals. Now, if you missed that session, we talked about what Agentic AI is, how it differs from many of the AI tools that are kind of commonly being used online today, and some of the structures and the planning that go into successful deployment in a business environment, both from a technical perspective, as well as in terms of privacy and legal considerations, which are always, of key importance. This session really builds on the information in that one by demonstrating use cases and some examples of agents that we've built that you can modify and adapt and apply your own explorations of this technology to. Now, if you didn't catch that session, you can find a recording on the OPIA's YouTube channel, youtube.com/@Ontario Printing, or by searching Ontario Printing YouTube. You should be able to find it through that, or of course at our website. I'm joined for this session by Christopher, Associate Professor at TMU, and really the one that is leading the charge on this in our research at the university. Chris had a long career in industry prior to shifting over to teaching, and he brings a ton of great knowledge and expertise around the challenges of adopting new and disruptive technologies in a business environment. So thank you, Christopher, for being with us today and really providing the key foundational knowledge for everything that we're about to cover in this session. Now, we gather online today from many different places across the province and across the country. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that the lands and the waters that we live and work on here in North America are the traditional territories of many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. In a field really centered on communication and image making and the sharing of knowledge, I think it's really important to remember that Indigenous peoples have had long sustained traditions of visual storytelling, of record keeping and material communication that kind of predates our modern print industry by generations. And I just want to offer this simple acknowledgement with gratitude and respect for the lands that we share today. Now, PrintPulse Live is, of course, managed and arranged by the Ontario Printing and Imaging Association, which works to empower the print and graphic communication industry and is, a foundational member of the national organization, the Canadian Print Industry Association. So whether it's advocating for the print industry with government or providing tools, resources, and training for the industry at large, the OPIA really works to improve the conditions for everyone working in the print and allied graphic industries. I also want to thank Evermore here. Chris and I have been very fortunate at the university to have the support of this Canadian technology company through their GPT-More platform, which we've been using in our research projects and with student projects at the School of Graphic Communication Management. The agent demos that we're showing today are actually built on this platform, and they've been generous enough to actually provide a discount code that will allow all of the attendees on the call today to create a free account and try out the system so that you can, replicate and build upon what we're demoing today, or, make your own agents and that meet your specific business needs. I think it was Ken in our webinar last month that was asking you about getting access here, and I'm glad you're on the session here today, Ken. So you will be able to get in there and play around with some of these tools. And we know that these projects can take a little while to get rolling. You've got a lot of other obligations and responsibilities. So they're providing 90 days of access for you to experiment with, building and piloting your own agent. So huge thanks to them for providing that access so that everyone at the webinar can really give things a fair test run without super strict time pressure and then, having to put a credit card and all that type of good stuff in. So let's stick around to the end of the session for that access code and you can play with things and start building your own on behalf of Evermore and the OPIA here. So a nice little bonus for the folks attending in person live. Or of course, use whatever systems that you are more comfortable and familiar with, but a nice little bonus for folks attending today. So with that, that's all of the thank yous out of the way. I'm going to turn it over to Chris, who's going to go over today's agenda for the session. So over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Lee. And what a kind way of saying I'm old. I really appreciate that. That was awesome. So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to go through a live demo, a two-part demo. When you're building an AI agent, there's two approaches: using structured data, so that'll be tables and spreadsheets and solid information, or unstructured data. And in our world, that would be client emails that might be convoluted. We'll talk about the guardrails, safety first. So of course, we'll talk about that last. And then a 5-step pilot plan if you wanted to get going on doing your own pilot plan with an AI agent, and plenty of time for questions and answers. A quick recap from last month. If you're not aware, AI configured for a specific role. It's not a chat-based generalist. This is not generative AI. We're not making content. It's a defined set of documents and data. Why? One of the reasons we like it is it could be your data, and your data doesn't get shared. So it could be your SOPs, it could be your company operations manual, it could be a variety of things. It does the repeatable tasks for your team. You can think of it as a junior staff member. You can't yell and swear at it. But what it's doing is eliminating the human as a courier. So if you've got people who are literally taking information from an email and putting it into a spreadsheet database or some sort of system, it should eliminate that step. We do this by focusing on 3 key areas: instructions and system prompts. So you have to define who it is, who it is and what it does, what attitudes it has. You can give it the knowledge and context. So a order entry person for a Canadian print operation is obviously going to be different than a front counter person in a car dealership. So you have to give it that context. There's a wide variety of different tools and capabilities that are available in the different modules. So you need to either give it access to those or to not give it access in order to keep it safe and secure. So these are some of the things to be aware of as you build with it. So build up the system prompt, taking that into account, add the knowledge and context, and then finally we'll add in the tools and capabilities. For example, can it go on the overall World Wide Web? Can it do that? Do you want it to do that? Does it have access to images? Can it use different email accounts? Things of that nature. So clear as mud, I know, so I'll pass it back to Lee and he'll jump right in. Thanks, Lee.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. So, I mean, the fun part always is, kind of building these things anyways. So we're going to get right into it today and actually just start building something live. And I will preface that, because this is a live demo, for any of you that have run live demos in front of an audience before, if something is going to go wrong, now is the time that it's going to go wrong. So we thought about pre-recording this part, but you only live once, and we're gonna give it a go, and if something doesn't work out, we will figure it out. Now, I will say that to save you all from watching me type a bunch of instructions out, I have pre-written all of my inputs here, and I've got my data tables all kind of organized so I can just kind of copy and paste to keep things moving along. But let's see how it works and then go from there. So if you were in our last session, you might remember that this is the basic structure of our agent. On the right-hand side, we have our operational instructions, which sometimes is referred to as a system prompt, and our data sources or our knowledge. So these are all connected to the agent setup, which is tied into an LLM, an actual language model that's going to be doing a lot of the interpretation. Now, the inputs and outputs and the actions for the demo here, I'm just going to use the agent interface. But in a deployment, I probably want to connect these, through tools and capabilities to, again, streamline the functions and build them into my workflow directly. But because, in a demo or even in testing, what we lose is that direct visibility. It's going into a black box and coming out with results. And I want to make sure that we can all kind of see what's really going on here. The example that I'm going to take is going to be a really simple one. For my agent, I wanted to start up with something specific, but also widely applicable that kind of uses existing structured data that I'm likely to have in my organization already. So I decided to build kind of a junior estimator for my cut sheet digital print production lines. So costing around toner-based or indigo type digital presses, right? I thought this was a good starting point because it's a common enough thing in so many printing environments that I think most people can relate to it while still being complex and varied enough to kind of require a little bit of brain power to process. So the basic workflow normally would be something like this. The client requests a price to a project person or CSR or production coordinator or whoever that person is, maybe a sales rep. That person reviews to make sure the information is kind of all there and accounted for, and it gives it to a senior staff person or estimator who does the pricing, passes it back to that first employee who then gives it to the client. Pretty straightforward process. The piece I wanted to replace here, obviously, with my agent was that estimator portion, ideally using something semi-automated in terms of kind of passing the info back and forth in and out. I still have a CSR production coordinator involved here though. They're the ones interacting with my agent, at least for now. So I started by reviewing the workflow of my existing estimating system. I was using Avanti for this, but any estimating system or process would do here, and breaking it down into the steps that an estimator would typically take to complete a request for quote or request for cost type action. And in this case, I divided the knowledge resources, that is the structured data I wanted to provide my agent with, into 4 kind of core simple tables. A production method rules that kind of define how it should think about specific steps, a stock and paper options and cost table, our press line costs, so it knows how much, click charge or impression costs would be, and then a bindery finishing costs. Now, I probably could have combined some of these files, but I'm trying to think long-term here as well. My bindery department doesn't really care if I ran the job on a toner-based machine or an offset press for most operations. So I wanted to build my knowledge resources somewhat modularly so that I could expand upon them in future or reuse them. So if this agent works out, I would clone it and maybe adapt it for another production method. So, keeping some of that knowledge modular allows me to reuse the resources in future builds without overcomplicating this one. And in addition to this, I wanted to make kind of a lengthy system prompt that gave my agent really detailed information about what I expected it to do, in what order, and with what additional considerations. Now, this is not something I wrote out all at once. It took a few sessions of kind of building, testing, and then refining or adding information here to really get where I needed it to go. So I'm going to pull open the interface now, and we'll build the agent together. We'll upload some data, and we'll run some quick tests on it. So let me just go in to my agent here, and I'm going to reshare that screen so that we can see what's going on. All right. So I'm in my Open Web UI interface here, and if I go just kind of to new chat, a lot of you will recognize this sort of look. This looks very much like ChatGPT or other similar things. What we have that's different in here is we have, this button that says Workspace. Right? So these are models that I've built before. These are our previous sort of iterations of this. And like I said, I want to build it with you live on screen. So I kind of built it, tested it, made sure if I reproduced it, it was going to kind of work. And we're going to go from there. I'm going to build a new model, a new agent in this case. So I'm going to add a new model. I'm going to call it Estimator Demo, right? And then I'm going to select one of my base models in here. So this is essentially the brain that I'm going to be tapping into for my logic engine. I'm going to use this particular one. Now I'm going to go grab from my pre-written stuff here, things like my description, right? So I guess I'm going to copy and paste my short description of what this model does. A junior print estimating agent reviews client job specs, checks for missing production details, so on and so forth. I can add some tags in here, something like estimate, and then I have my system prompt. Now, this is what I actually want to give as kind of the core repeatable instructions. Now, the difference between the system prompt and the knowledge is that my knowledge might be, like in the case of this demo, a file that I'm going to upload here, but it also might be, where I'm connecting to external data sources. So I want to keep my sort of core instructions in my system prompt as to how this estimator demo agent is going to behave, while I separate my knowledge, like how much my paper costs and stuff, into my knowledge sections. So my system prompt here is actually quite elaborate, as I mentioned. So I've got, and I'll go through it, but I just want to copy and paste it in first. So I pasted it all in, and I want to upload my knowledge bases. And when my knowledge bases are being uploaded, we'll go through that system prompt a little bit more. Okay, so my knowledge bases that I've got in this case, if I say upload files, again, I have 4 different knowledge bases that I want. I have my rules, or my production method rules. Open that one up. That's going to upload. I'm going to open up my press costing master, which basically has things like my click charges and my setup costs, has my operator time and costs of labor, my house stocks, and finally my finishing costs, so my bindery costs. So I've given it these 4 knowledge files. I've given it this fairly elaborate system prompt, and the system prompt basically goes through exactly what it is that I want it to do. So it starts off with telling it its role. Again, you're a print estimating assistant, a junior print estimator for a mid-sized commercial print shop, et cetera, et cetera. It goes through objectives, what it's trying to do. It talks about normalizing language. So if the wording, is something like full color, we're going to turn that into print notation of 4/4 for CMYK. Our scope, factors, knowledge source files, all of these different things. So again, this is something I built over time to give it a lot of information. And I'm happy to share this with everyone on the call. We'll post it on the OPIA website so that you guys can download it. And again, you can change this, refine this, etc. But it'll give you something to start with. Really important here is my workflow. I'm asking it to parse the job, to check for missing information, to, ask targeted follow-up questions. One of the things you'll find if you go through my system prompt in detail is that over and over, I'm basically telling it that if there is any information missing, it needs to make sure it's requesting that of the user. And I also ask it to, tell me its confidence at the end of this. How confident is it in its own response that, I can evaluate it and see if I need to really, review it in more detail. What it does as next steps, estimating rules, assumption policies, so on and so forth. So lots of information in there. And again, like I said, I'll provide this to you. And I mean, prompt and system prompts, it can be much simpler than this, but I wanted to make sure I was kind of covering as many bases as I could here. All right. The other thing I wanted to show you is some of those knowledge files. So I'm just going to pull up things like our stock information. So this is a really simple CSV file. I've cut it down to just my ones that'll be running on my cut sheet toner, and just some examples of different stocks that are available and, costs and whatnot. So this is something that I put together for this demo, but obviously, you're going to want to feed this in either from a live data source or from what's being provided for your vendors. And obviously how that data is formatted might also change how your tool has to kind of interpret things. So we uploaded the data, we got all of our system prompt information in here. I can go down here to capabilities and I can, toggle some of these on or off. Like, do I need to accept image input? Probably not. Do I need to generate images? Again, probably not for this one. So what I want to do is I want to review each of these capabilities and I want to adjust them based on what I expect or would want this particular agent to do. So Chris had mentioned, like, do you want it to be able to search the web? Again, I don't want it pulling in information from the web in general, probably on this one, so I'm going to turn that off as well. But do I want it to allow file uploads? Yes. Do I want to have context? Definitely. Do I want to have the code interpreter? This is important because it allows it to perform calculations. So I'm going to leave that one on. So it's not code like computer code. It's any sort of mathematical functions as well. Do we want to have citations in the response? Most definitely. I want to know, or I want it to be able to tell me where it's pulled the information from. Right? So I can go through those and I can just sort of toggle certain things on and off. I'm going to hit save and create. Actually, the one more thing I want to do is add in my default prompt here, which I got, again, pre-made in here. Default prompt, just going to add that one in, and it's going to be estimate. And the last thing, if I want, I can give it a nice icon. It's always nice to have nice visual and attach it to things. All right, save and create. So that is my estimator demo. If I now click on this, how can I help you today? I need an estimate. And again, these are the points where we want to systematically kind of add inputs and outputs. But because we've got this demo and I want to be able to show you kind of the thinking process behind this agent that I created, right? So I've asked it, what do I need to provide you? So it gives me this list of stuff and a lot of kind of next questions about how I would want to do this. So I've already again prepared my estimate request, and it's just a fairly straightforward one of some postcards, right? Digitally printed postcards, 6" by 4" flat, no folding, pretty straightforward type of estimate. But what's really interesting about this is the way it's going to process through this. And when I give it that information, right, it first starts searching the knowledge base, because that's what I've provided it. And if you tip open this little arrow, it'll actually show you its thought process as it goes through. So it's thinking about this, but it's actually got this kind of stream of consciousness where it's thinking about, oh, you know, how much gutter placement do I need, and how much clearance around the edges, and the calculations for all of that. So again, you don't have to tip this open, but I find it really interesting to review, as well as to kind of show its work as it were, right? So when we have this type of system to go through it, we can also use that for some kind of error correction and checking. So if you get a result when we're doing our testing process that isn't particularly accurate for some reason, maybe it's misunderstood something, we can look through that kind of stream of consciousness, figure out where it is that it's going wrong, and then either refine our system prompt or our knowledge or our data to kind of address that and help fix it. And like I said, without fail, when I'm doing a demo, something's going to go wrong. So I'm getting a little bit of a slow response time on this. So I'm just going to pull up my previous conversation where I gave it the same question. And here's the output that we got on it. So again, I'm looking for postcards. It figured out or parsed my information to figure out what I needed. It looked at the imposition, figured out how many would fit. Those of you that have done digital printing know that, you know, 6 by 4 is super annoying in terms of fitting on a press sheet, that they don't fit well onto a 12/18 sheet. But then it gives me this full breakdown. What's my press setup? How many sheets do I actually need? How many have I specified for waste? And if we go back into my Excel files again, we'll see that a lot of these things, or actually all of these things, are things that I gave it as rules. So if we go into, you know, production method rules, for example, it talks about flagging, for example, sizes that are too large for the printable area. Or if we open up our press line costing module, right? We've got our press sizes, we've got the type of printing that is being available on this particular press, whether it can, you know, run duplex, all of that type of good detail, right? So it's pulling directly from all of these data sources in order to build this final table of information and our final price. But it's also giving me a lot of rationale behind it as well. So again, especially during testing, I want to see how it's thinking about things, right? So it's understanding how many sheets are being used, how it's actually, you know, finishing them, that it's going to be in shrink packs, and then, you know, the cost behind those. It also gives me any assumptions that it's made, right? Any missing or unconfirmed details, right? Even something as simple as confirmation that the house stock is actually available at the moment. Do we actually have any, even though it's listed on our house stock list? The final pickup logistics, all of these types of good things. So again, through this process, and this is one I've only been working on for a little while, we're able to review exactly what it's doing, connect it to these structured data sources, and then allow it to kind of go nuts on combining these things together and bringing them into a final review ready estimate anyways. You know, I think the other thing that it did in here, I had told it not to apply any markup, like profit markup, just straight cost, and don't apply taxes, that I'll do that in the final quote out to my client. So you can see how things kind of come together in that workspace, from giving it its role, giving it its details, and giving it the knowledge base that it's going to use to execute the task that you asked it to do. Let me flip back over to the presentation here. And like I said, I can provide all of those sort of sample files for you to play around with as we go as well. So my next steps for expanding the capabilities here for this agent would be things like, increasing the bindery options to cover less common tasks. Right now I've got, 3-hole drilling in there, but I don't have 2-hole drilling or round cornering or whatever those other sort of items that I have available in my shop. And by building it kind of step by step and then integrating external data sources like my vendor stock price lists and other items, I can then provide structured data that gives them really consistent results. But that's obviously not, something we can do with all tasks. You don't always have a nice clean data file to work with. So I'm going to hand it over to Chris, who's going to talk a little bit more about building agents around unstructured information here as well.
Thanks, Lee. Oh, Ken, how about you? When we had the last demo, you asked if Evermore had personal accounts. They do now. It was in development. We couldn't talk about it then. So in case you're wondering, what? So you will see I've got the same sort of collection of agents that are available there. Okay, let's just jump into that when we'll come back. My first attempt would have been a junior project person. So you've seen the interface, the environment. Most of these are now gravitating towards ChatGPT just from an interface perspective because it's what the world's used to. Doesn't mean it's the best. So I'm going to pick that agent. I'll do a quick edit and just being not a counterpoint to Lee, I have a 1-sentence prompt here. You were a junior production coordinator for a commercial printing company in Ontario, Canada. That's it. That's all I've given it. For the face model, at the risk of sounding like a salesperson, one of the reasons I enjoy working with Evermore is they give you the ability to use a lot of different large language models and run them in parallel to compare. These are getting changed, not weekly, of course, but every month. So what's a really good one for working on images today will be replaced by something else tomorrow. So I appreciate the flexibility. This one I'm using seemed to be good at figuring out emails. I've left everything turned on. I've given it no knowledge. I've basically just hired it and said, listen, I'm going for lunch, get to work. That's it. So if I go back into this one, I've given it one email, just an email order form, and asked it to look at it and extract the print information. What it's given to me is job number, quantity, size, paper color, finishing, knows there's an artwork file located in the Dropbox folder, has the due date, and the perf it's yelling at me. That's from 1 sentence asking it to do that. Oh, beg my pardon. Lee, can you see the email?
Yep.
Okay, so if you want to read, one of the first things we would do is sample files together. So I've had this email, and this is the email that went, and it parsed the information out of that. Clearly, there can be some concerns with that, if that's the way you want it to work, because of all the opportunity for errors, and this is a special case, not everything worked. So to build upon that, I want to give it more of a role and an identity. Similar to what Lee was saying, I managed to destroy my own agent a mere 30 minutes before this demo, because I was trying to get it to do too much. But in this case, same deal, using the same language model, the same initial prompt, but now I'm trying to give it a role and identity, a tone and a voice. I want it to be supportive, but not blunt. So I don't want it to be like me. I want it to be able to be adaptive. If speak the language of a client. So if a client's got a high energy client, kind of reflect that back if and when it's going to be client facing. Right now, I want it to work in English only and give it the core tasks. I won't laundry list all this, but these are another example of how you can iterate up as you build this and give it core tasks: customer support, due date and shipping, operations. For its knowledge, I gave it a glossary of printing terms, and it was nice to be able to, non-reproduction blue is one I hadn't thought of in a while, and that popped up today, so that made me feel old. I've given it a guide to digital printing, a pre-press guide, and an open source copy of the American Handbook. So it has all those on its own, but I'm quite happy letting it search the web on its own too. So that's everything it's got. So when I do, I'm sorry, everybody's barfing as I do that. I'm checking in. Are you awake? Are you there? Are you working? And then get it to extract the information, and it reads the email and tries to get all the information it can and put into a format it can use. So based on a grassroots poll or an analysis, one of the first areas a lot of people are using an AI agent for is the triage of the email inbox. So it may not be client facing, but it's trying to pull this structure out so whoever is looking at this doesn't have to pull all this info out. It's trying to pull this structure out so whoever is looking at this doesn't have to pull all this info out. It's ready to go if it's okay. So it does save that initial time with regards to that. It's got the timelines. It's looking, hey, I don't have the address, and it looks like somebody forgot to send the attachment, and then it's happily saying ready to go. This is a conversation it's having with an internal staff person. It's not having it with the client yet. So then I can get it to work on another one, and I've got a variety of different email orders that I've built with different requests, different names, different problems designed into them. So this is a problem with me doing it because this isn't live data. Anybody in the field would have easily put their hands on a bunch of emails that were good, bad, or mediocre. And that would be much better to train an agent with. So I'm already gaming the system, just be aware of that, but trying to think of stuff that wouldn't be in there. So I've got about 4 of those and I'm running all those through. The confidence score in this case, which is a key piece, would be at 95% because they were worried about the file. So the AI thinks it's done a good job, but that doesn't mean it's done a good job. To get it to the next step, we'll talk a little bit about that when the live demo is over. Get it to save it as a CSV file so you can drop that into a spreadsheet, a database, or systems that you've got internally. But you can see here, it's pulling out all the information that it wants to, or it's able to, and still thinks it's doing a very good job, which is great. I'll roll down a little bit towards the end, only see it in a table format with wow. There you go. So this would be start to build out that way, that I've got all my fields it can find here and the information I need on it as I go across, and it could act on this. A little bit of a look here on this end, the 4th order, it thinks that the inside is going to be 100 pound and the cover is going to be 60 pound. So this is clearly not a good thing, and it should have stopped at that. And the agent that I built yesterday did. Today's agent isn't. And it's built using the same prompt on the same large language model. So just something to be aware of is sometimes they go a little bit different, but it should have been able to flag that as a problem. And I will tell it it was a problem and it will fix that in the future. That's when you go back and tell the prompt, double check this. And we've got all that information and I can organize it accordingly. Full color, as Lee said, it should have been able to make that CMYK implied. But if it's toner based. Yeah, so there we were just at the simple workflow. We were talking to project person, email triage. And if we can flip to the next slide, where we're not doing in the demo today is the piece of software that would actually take that information and automatically drop in. Right now you have the person as the gatekeeper, which is what you would want when you're first building up this level of expertise. If the challenge with this is you're saving that individual person a couple hours or 10 hours a week. And I think of that more as personal productivity. So I'm not quite sure if that person's really going to give it back to the organization or not. So after you've built this agent, and then you start connecting them together, that's when you get the operational efficiencies where it can save the overall process time and error reduction as well. So that was the new person we built. And if we want to integrate it, the AI agent can be figured to create a row in a spreadsheet. I don't know how many people are using workflow automation cloud tools like Trello, Zapier, Active Sheets, things of that nature. Could be set to just watch for a Google Sheet, then create an instance or a card in your project management system. And away you roll after you've got that done. That's where the next part would come after the agent has been released to be able to do its work.
Yeah, so integration is going to be dependent on your individual business setup, and it's going to really depend on the context of those inputs and outputs needed here. Again, for the demo purposes, it made sense to kind of show that testing environment where we're actually building the agents. But ideally, as things progress and your confidence kind of grows in your agent's accuracy and reliability, you can consider chaining agents together in sequence, for example. So you could take something like Chris's unstructured data processing agent, funnel those emails in, extract all of the actual print specs, and then feed them directly into my estimating agent, and then output that results of that into an existing data table like an MIS estimating system or whatever that next step is for your team. Maybe just an email back to them saying like, hey, I prepared this estimate, take a quick look at it. Here's my confidence level, and then pass it on to the client if that's kind of the next step in your particular workflow and production. Now, obviously, we want to ensure that there are guardrails here because as we show in this demo, most of the time doing pretty well. Occasionally, it's still coughing up a fur ball and we need to address it. Same way that we have with a junior employee, that we want to make sure that there's still someone kind of overseeing things and validating the information on critical actions, sending emails, deleting data, authorizing external API calls. There was a great story on Reddit the other day where, basically they had set up a voice enabled AI agent to do collection calls. And it called to a customer saying, hey, your invoice is overdue, blah, 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 blah. On the customer side of things, they'd also set up a AI agent to receive calls. And these two very polite robots ended up talking to each other for something like 6 days straight because they were too polite to hang up on each other, and using all sorts of, tokens of AI usage and all the resources as a result. We want to restrict the tools the agent can access. We don't need a planning agent to have access to a web browsing tool necessarily. And sometimes, giving them access to more than they need will overcomplicate their process or cause them to rely on data sources that we haven't necessarily vetted. We want to log and maintain kind of the trace of reasoning. So when I was showing you how you would tip open to see the logic steps, especially when something goes wrong, it'll help us understand what we need to adjust in our system prompt in order to make it more reliable in the future. So again, like any testing, you go through a process of building this and throwing first simple examples at it, and then more complicated examples. And as you give it more complicated examples, you'll find things that it's doing well and things that it is misunderstanding. Now, sometimes you can adjust those in that system prompt to give it kind of the heads up. So in Chris's case, for example, looking at the cover versus the text and seeing, are these weights making sense for a typical production? And that's something that, again, we all kind of know from working in industry that we take for granted. And we don't kind of think about that if you were going to train someone who's completely new, that this is something that is kind of a rule of thumb. And so it's codifying a lot of those rules of thumb, that systematic knowledge we have, into something that doesn't necessarily have that sort of same print common sense. We also want to make sure that we're, not providing, especially when dealing with end clients, any guarantees around things like pricing or timelines. Right? If there isn't direct human approval. So these are all things that we can kind of show it. And again, if you take a look at the system prompt, there's a bunch of things where I said, like, do not ever promise this, this, or this in your quotes that you're giving back to me. And then filtering our user input to detect kind of any sort of malicious attempts or prompt injections or malicious code designed to manipulate the agent specifically. Anyone who's worked in IT and software development, you always want to assume the best of everyone who is a user, but you have to plan for the worst as well. Context or domain constraints, limiting the agent to specific topics, blocking, an agent that is an HR agent from discussing sports or legal matters outside of company policy, and then, redacting any personally identifiable information. So this is something where we want to make sure we're protecting our clients as well as our staff and their clients when it comes to things like mailing lists that are being sent in or other things. And I know this is something that we deal with a lot. Anyone that does variable data printing, obviously the safety and security of mailing lists and personal data, really, really important here. So I'm going to pass it back to Chris, who's going to go through kind of pilot planning steps, where you should go from here if you wanted to try to implement this. What are kind of the easy steps to take over the next little while?
Thanks, Lee. Before you start, define what correct is. Don't do any changes without measuring how you're going to determine if it's a success or not. So this is where you'd come up with your collection email triage agent. Got to collect emails, some good ones, some messy ones, or some noise, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Fill out a table or spreadsheet with about 30 of those, and that's what the agent can refer to benchmark against. So it's got that table already started to be built, and it can build up from there. So it understands what's right and what's wrong. It isn't creating a table from scratch. Look at how you're going to build the architecture. I'm a big fan of low cost and easy integration. This is something that anybody should be able to spin up quick. If you're going to pick an AI, pick one with a high token limit, and this is changing all the time. More tokens, just like an arcade, costs you more money, and different processes take a lot more tokens. But some different AI agents have already doubled their token limit just in the last month. So they're starting to compete on price. Your triggers, your kickoffs for your workflow, Zapier or active pieces, there's going to be 16 different versions of these things that you can use if you want to help connect the pieces together. Your knowledge and prompt building, examples of your own emails, examples of your own internal policies, examples of equipment manuals, anything like that you can use to help build up its knowledge. And then as you refine the prompts, if that's what's required for you to get it to work better. So go into the alpha stage at the risk. Anyhow, yes, please don't make this client facing. Don't expose that to anything. But you have to give it an ability to show what it's doing. So put it maybe to a Google sheet or something. The email agent can read and parse the emails, create a new row in the spreadsheet, and then assign its own confidence score. And so that's what you could go through, or a person could go through and look at the confidence scores and see if they match what the actual results were, so they can see and help train it. And then you do a prompt to try to make it a little bit better. And that's how you start doing the iterations. My own opinion, only change one thing at a time. You'll be like me today, not running into great news when you're trying to do the demo. But once you've got the alpha sorted out, move it into beta and have it actually run in shadow. So the background daily operations, you've picked hopefully just one person, maybe a small group of people, might even just be for one client. And then your job can get entered manually, but you check that against the results that the agents did to see if they're close or what might need some further work. And then you can set up an option for the person doing the checking where they can toggle it or flag it as either right or not right, and just track the pure efficacy. Don't change on a case-by-case basis. It could be something in the email that's triggering it. Wait till you see a pattern, or do one change and then change it back. Make an iteration. You can save these agents. And so a fix for one thing, but other things stop working. Again, what happened to me. Once you're happy with that, you can let it go live. It's obviously everybody's own decision whether you do the big bang or just roll it out on a client basis. If there's a low confidence score, it should raise an alert to a project person or somebody at that point to say, hey, have a look at this. And at that point, the person should only be auditing what it's doing rather than entering the data. They've now freed up that time to be able to process more emails or take on some of the next steps as you further automate into the workflow. Guardrails. Client data, maybe not something you want to be using with an outside AI. Why we're kind of fans of the sovereign IT and systems that promise that they won't share it. Have your tools on sovereign IT platforms, and that way you're definitely protected from accidentally sharing some sort of client information that you just shouldn't be sharing.
We've already got some questions in the chat, which is fantastic. We've got a few minutes left. So Craig's asked in the chat, have we integrated directly with Avanti for starting an estimate? I haven't actually built it to integrate directly into Avanti because again, I'm in education and everything's locked down. But having used Avanti for many years, that would be my next step, would be to start mapping some data fields into the Avanti estimating API system. And so depending on which version and which API and which modules you're using in Avanti would be where I would go next. But it also, again, really depends on what you want the system to do at the end of the day. Is it complementing Avanti? And it should, because then your production team can, of course, pull that estimate directly into their docket. Or is it something where, you're using it for kind of preliminary things, or for smaller lines that you're not necessarily running through the Avanti estimating module directly? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to answer Scott's question.
Oh, yeah, great. If you got to answer Scott's question, that's fantastic.
It's contextual in the company, Scott. For us, we'd be tracking live job info in the cloud using Google tools, but and yes, you certainly can keep an AI agent blocked from the web altogether. So it will only use what you tell it to use. And again, not selling Evermore, but use some solution that isn't one of the big behemoths, and the information isn't outside of Canada. But then if it is still outside of your organization, somebody could get access to it. But for the most part, this is job order information, not necessarily client details of a deep level, but their email addresses. I hope that answered that.
And Bob asks, will the slides be available? Yeah, I'm totally fine posting these up on the OPIA website so that you guys can access them. We'll do a quick review. I don't think there's anything proprietary in here, but I will want to make sure that there isn't, and then I'll get them over to Ken, who can get them up on the website. So really happy to share that with everyone. And again, same thing with that Word document that I was copying and pasting out of that had my enormous system prompt. so that you can take a look at it and then decide that I'm way overcomplicating things and do something simpler. But you're always welcome to kind of take a look and review and make those modifications as you need. If there's any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And otherwise, the other thing I wanted to kind of flag here was that we have our next PrintPulse live session coming up. We're moving away from technology a little bit, although, technology is part of everything. Next month, we're going to be featuring OPIA favorite Joanne Gore doing a talk on confusion to conversion, how one messaging playbook unified our company and closed more deals. So Joanne, if you've run into her before, she is an author, she is a communications expert, she focuses on B2B sales and is a huge advocate of the print industry, which is one of the reasons we love her at OPIA. This session will really look at a challenge that many print businesses know well, that different departments often describe the company in different ways, which creates confusion for customers and kind of weakens the overall sales message. So in this webinar coming up at the end of April, we're really going to explore how one organization moved from this fragmented sort of internally focused messaging to clearer, more unified approach that helped to connect their customer needs, help to support stronger sales results, and sort of get everyone on the same page. And really uncovers the hidden cost of inconsistent messaging across an organization, why customer problems should lead the conversation rather than company pride points, and how to balance sort of attraction and credibility in a way that actually helps to close business. So it's a practical before and after case study. Should be especially useful for owners, sales teams, marketing staff, anyone involved in kind of shaping how the company presents itself to market from a business development perspective. So that sounds relevant to your business. Keep an eye out for registration details, which we'll be sending out through all the normal channels, or follow us on LinkedIn, and we'd be super happy to have you join us for that one. Also, if you like what we're doing with this series, you want to support the OPIA directly, consider becoming a member if you're not already. We've got a promotion on this year where we're welcoming new members with a 50% reduction in membership fees for the first year. You can find out more information about that at ontarioprinting.org. And, always happy to involve and include more members in the OPIA. You can always reach out to me or anyone on the PrintPulse Live crew. In addition to Joanne, we have some other great sessions coming up this year. If you're someone that has an idea for a talk, either one you'd love to see us cover or one you want to give, please connect with me as well. I'd love to hear from you about what you want to see us do with this series. We've had some great access to some wonderful industry experts, and we want to keep on delivering content that you guys find valuable. So, and if you do dive in and build an agent after this session, Chris and I would love to hear your experience with that as well. I'm very big, obviously, on knowledge sharing, what worked, what didn't work, and we'd love to hear about what you're able to accomplish either with Evermore tools or whatever other platforms that you are tapped into. So really appreciate everyone's feedback on this. That pretty much wraps us up for today. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much, Chris, for kind of leading this, and I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the weekend.